Hi, everyone. Meteorologist Bill Rentschler in the 1011 Now streaming studio, joined by Chief Meteorologist Ken Siemek. And we are going to go do a little deep dive into tonight's severe weather potential. Again, what we can expect, when we can expect it, who will see what we expect, and all the rest of it.
A couple of things we don't like. This is really our first widespread severe weather threat of the season, so folks might not be paying an awful lot of attention, or maybe have not taken their precautions. The other thing that we don't like is that this, for a lot of folks, is going to be an overnight thing, Bill. Mm-hmm. And that means, it's one thing, and we'll certainly be here all night long into the wee hours of the morning and wait for Brad Anderson to join us early tomorrow morning, whatever the case may be. But a lot of folks are going to go to bed at 11 o'clock or midnight because there's not going to be severe weather in their neighborhood or close to their neighborhood. And so we want to make sure that we remind those folks that they have got to have a way to be alerted in case severe weather would develop or move into their area very late tonight or very early tomorrow morning.
And so on screen here, again, the QR code to download the 1011 weather app. Again, a great resource to keep you informed. We would like you to have multiple ways, whether it's the 1011 weather app and something else, whether that be a NOAA weather radio, those wireless emergency alerts you get on your phone, something, because like you said, Ken, these are the most kind of difficult scenarios because if you have a really bad thunderstorm, if there is a tornado warning and it's heading towards a community and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, not only do you have trouble seeing it because it's literally dark outside, so we have that much more difficulty getting confirmation of things if they're on the ground or hail sizes, but people are also asleep.
Well, and this is just not a scenario that we're used to seeing. Can we get severe weather overnight into the wee hours of the next morning? Absolutely, it happens. It happens a few times a year, but we're just not in severe weather mode yet, and then to have this, our first widespread, at least the potential for our first widespread event with folks maybe in bed overnight, we're a little bit maybe more concerned that we would normally be there. So you're absolutely right. That weather app is a great tool, and obviously we will be on with coverage throughout the overnight hours on 1011. But it's important that people realize before they go to bed at night, okay, this is what I can expect to have happen if severe weather would develop.
And so right now we're streaming live on 1011's platforms, also on our 1011 YouTube channel. If anyone has any questions while watching, feel free. Again, you can comment on the YouTube channel, and we can try to get to some of your questions if there are any that pop up into the chat. So again, we'll walk through here next kind of what we have currently on the board, because right now it's not necessarily a lot. It's been a pretty quiet evening, pretty nice evening for many of us across the state. Starting to see some thunderstorms in some spots, but again, if you were here in Lincoln, not a bad night out there.
Well, it's been very quiet. I mean, we've seen some clouds increase, and there is some shower and thunderstorm activity to the south of Lincoln and Lancaster County. You get a little bit closer. We'll show folks radar in a little bit. But there is some new information on this map. Now, we had the severe thunderstorm watch at 5 and 6 during the newscast, but now there is a brand new tornado watch for portions of south central Nebraska and north central Kansas.
And that runs until 3 a.m. Tuesday. Again, the severe thunderstorm watch is through midnight tonight with the new tornado watch. Again, the hazards that are possible. Again, so you're talking Grand Island, Hastings, Kearney, down towards Holdridge, up to 3-inch diameter hail. It's about the size of an apple.
Yeah, we had to look that one up just to make sure because that's pretty big hail. Mm-hmm. You're talking about major, you're talking about 75, 80, 85, 90 mile an hour updrafts. Potentially with these thunderstorms, they're going to keep those hailstones suspended in the air and making their trip and adding more ice and more water while they're in those freezing layers inside those thunderstorms. And the potential there is that those things could get to apple size before they fall in the strongest storms. That's the potential we're talking. We don't have that reported anywhere.
Nope.
We don't have that kind of thunderstorm activity now, but that's the potential we're going to be talking about.
That's the high end. Scattered wind gusts up to kind of high end, 75 miles an hour possible. And again, it is a tornado watch, so several tornadoes are possible. Maybe one or two strong tornadoes can't be ruled out. Again, if you dive into the weeds here and kind of get into the probabilities from the Storm Prediction Center, it is kind of that area in south central Nebraska into parts of northern Kansas that have the highest probability according to the Storm Prediction Center, which, if you punch up the outlook here, you have that enhanced risk covering most of the coverage area.
And so when we see something like this, 3, 4, 5 days ago, we started out with a marginal risk, then it became a slight risk. Then yesterday, I think the SPC did indicate some pockets of enhanced risk, but this is a huge area. I mean, this covers about 80-90% of the 10-11 coverage zone. So that is a gigantic area of enhanced, and that means we could be looking at that significant weather in any of those locations. Not necessarily, we're going to be talking about some spots that have a little bit better likelihood of seeing tornadoes if we're going to see tornadic thunderstorms, and that, of course, is going to be in that south central Nebraska, north central Kansas area. But we can't rule it out even outside that tornado watch area, and we'll kind of see how things play out as we move through the late night and early morning hours on Tuesday.
And just had someone ask, will the tornado watch expand further to the north? We will more than likely see some expansions of probably both the severe thunderstorm watch and the tornado watch to cover parts of eastern Nebraska. It's just that the threat for those areas is still several hours away.
Right. And you're going to start to get into that overnight time period, Bill, where normally or naturally the atmosphere begins to lose a little bit of its instability. The problem that we've got here is we have got an extremely powerful weather system that's combining with a warm front. It's combining with a dry line. We've got a lot of turn in the atmosphere, a lot of shear in the atmosphere. And if you notice today, your dew points were much higher. Mm-hmm. We mentioned that at 5 and 6 o'clock tonight as well. And so, it's a little bit of a guessing game now. Could we get lucky in eastern Nebraska and see that tornadic threat begin to wane by the time we get to 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning? And so we're dealing with severe thunderstorms more than we are a tornadic threat. But right now it's just too tough to call.
And so up on screen here, we have the tornado probability. This is from the Storm Prediction Center. Again, those areas in yellow indicating a 10% chance. That's 10% basically within 25 miles of a point. So you pick a spot in that yellow risk, and anywhere within 25 miles, there's a 10% chance. Again, kind of getting into the weeds there a little bit. But that is the look at the tornado probability. Again, highest in parts of central Nebraska. The severe wind probability also highest across parts of south central Nebraska. But again, those areas in yellow expand all the way into parts of eastern Nebraska, and the severe hail probability, again, covers a good chunk of the region, 30%. Again, those hatched areas is talking about severe hail, so you're talking hail that's 2-inch plus in size. So, again, large majority of the 10-11 coverage area. Under the primary threat for hail would be number 1, probably 2 wind gusts, 3 tornadoes, 4 flash flooding.
And if you get to 75-mile-per-hour straight-line winds with some of these severe thunderstorms, if that indeed happens as well, you're talking about low-end tornadic wind speeds, right? Yeah, 65 to 85 miles an hour. So that would be your EF0 range there. So if you're going to end up with some of these thunderstorms at 75 miles per hour, wind gusts, if not a little bit higher, you're talking about the same type of wind speeds that you might be seeing in a weak tornado.
So coming up here on 8:30, just running you through the currents before we can look at the radar and kind of what we can expect and where. Because we had a question of when is Lincoln going to have the worst and what kind do you think we'll have, which we'll get to in just a second. But 79 right now at the studio, and you mentioned it, Ken. A little soupy out there, especially for mid-April. Dew point is at 65 here in Midtown Lincoln. Statewide, temperatures still warm in the 70s to right around 80 degrees, and you can see the moisture, those dew points anywhere from the mid-50s to mid-60s. But check out the dry line. Look at the dew point in Sydney right now.
Yeah.
2.
And that's important for people to realize that. That is another front. I mean, it's basically another lifting mechanism, mm-hmm. right? Because the moisture that you have, that air is going to be able to be lifted by some of that dry air that's going to be denser. And so that it acts like another front. So we've got a warm front kind of in southeastern Nebraska. You can see some higher dew points in the 60s there, and then those numbers go down a little bit as you move into the northeastern part of the state. So we've got a warm front attached to this surface low. We got a dry line that's going to continue to develop in the west, and that's going to act as another focusing mechanism for these thunderstorms to fire up. And then you haven't mentioned it yet, but we're going to be talking about an increasing low-level jet later tonight. And again, those 3 things are going to be primary players when it comes to our severe weather threat and the potential for tornadoes.
Looking at the winds right now, again, sustained generally out of the south and east at about 15 to 30 miles an hour. This is going to continue to be an issue tonight. It's going to continue to be an issue tomorrow, and it's just going to depend on what side of the low you're on as to which direction the wind is coming from. Eventually, we'll see a more northerly or northwesterly or even just straight westerly wind as the surface low tracks across the state. And again, winds, this is without thunderstorms, are still gusting as high as 40, 50, 55 miles an hour across the state. So
yeah, we had a 52 mile per hour peak wind gust in Grand Island probably within the last hour. So you're already talking about pretty powerful winds, and that's before we get any kind of convective activity to develop.
So right now, satellite and radar picture, there's nothing currently that is warned that is currently on the board right now. But like you mentioned, there's a couple areas that we're watching. One of them is the warm front kind of across the northern tier of the state, arcing down into the southeastern part of the state where there's some activity showing up on the radar. None of this right now is severe at this moment. And again, this is not the main show that we're expecting for Lincoln or southeastern Nebraska.
Certainly wouldn't, and we even mentioned that during the weathercast, Bill. You know, there has been a small chance, 20% chance, for a shower or thunderstorm during the evening hours. And folks here in Lincoln have seen clouds roll in, and so that is certainly not out of the question, and you can see that activity there. But this is not what we expect to create severe thunderstorms and the tornadic potential that we're going to see later on tonight. We think that activity is going to develop in portions of Kansas, in southwestern Nebraska, either along that dry line or as that low-level jet kicks in. And then those storms, if they would hold together, moving to the east-northeast, then that would provide the Lincoln area and the Omaha area and the Beatrice area with our severe weather threat, which we think is probably not going to be until tomorrow morning, sometime between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. in the Lincoln area.
And so sliding on over to southwestern Nebraska, again, things right now are clear. Again, if you kind of zoom down a little bit, look across parts of Kansas, this is where we're going to kind of watch, again, for the storms that we will see later on overnight tonight, like you just mentioned. Still not a whole lot of activity cooking just yet in those areas. We have had some severe thunderstorms, though, across parts of the Sandhills tonight. That activity is weakened as it's lifted off to the north.
Right, and those were the only areas. I think we had Hooker, and I think we had a couple of warnings for Cherry County. Mm-hmm. Those have been the only warnings so far. And but again, that severe thunderstorm watch, goes until midnight. So could we see redevelopment there? Absolutely could, but right now, not much going on. Sometimes this is the hardest part, right, where we're sitting here talking about severe weather and spent many minutes at 4 and at 5 and at 6 o'clock in our newscast talking about the potential for severe weather, and everybody that watched you at 4 and now is sitting here maybe watching this at 8:30 is going,
where is it?
Where is it? So sometimes you have to have faith. And again, it's not that we wouldn't love to be wrong on this and have absolutely nothing happen. We just don't think that's going to be the case. There are too many atmospheric ingredients coming together, too much instability right now across the middle part of the country that something's going to happen. Right now it's quiet, but something's going to happen at some point, and then those storms are going to race probably to the east-northeast.
So this is a look at the regional view. You can kind of see the spin off to our west across the Four Corners region out towards Colorado. That's that surface low that we've been talking about, upper level low with this storm system that's going to swing on through. And Ken, just because you spend so much time on it, I want everyone to be able to see it again.
Thanks very much.
That's
a beautiful map. It's a beautiful map. We don't want to. We just don't want to. We just don't want to tell people it takes me about 2.5 hours to put that together when I could be working on something else. Well, this is a pretty good indicator. Now, what I would tell you, Bill, is that cold front, the blue thing with the, everybody knows or most folks know, the cold front, that's true, but that's also a close approximation to that dry line. Mm-hmm. So, at 8 o'clock tonight, it had pretty quiet conditions on there with the storms in the north central part of the state and maybe a little bit of isolated activity near that warm front in southeastern Nebraska. But that's how it plays out pretty well as far as 8 o'clock this evening is concerned. The problem is going to be, again, you can see the eruption of thunderstorms. And again, we move in 12-hour increments on these synoptic maps. So you can see those thunderstorms developing along that cold front, along that dry line with the support of the low-level jet. With those winds are going to increase, and we're going to see additional lift, which is going to help create the large hail threat as well as the tornadic threat. And then this gets us through 8 a.m. You can see those storms moving into eastern Nebraska. And we think that the severe weather threat tomorrow is going to be significantly lower than it is today, but we still wouldn't rule out a couple of isolated strong or marginally severe storms tomorrow. That's how much instability we're going to have in the area as that low tracks through. And I think you mentioned it a couple of times. We could see the sun break out tomorrow around midday. And of course, most folks are going, oh, good, the sun's coming out. Well, not necessarily. If you've got dramatically colder air aloft, you poke that sun out and you lift some of that air, and you can create some additional severe weather.
And so then we will see the sun, and then the actual low moves through, so clouds roll back in.
Wrap back in around it.
And more rain potentially heads our way late afternoon tomorrow into Tuesday evening. The second round is not supposed to be, as again, like you mentioned, as significant as this initial round we're expecting overnight tonight and into tomorrow. Then that low lifts off to the north and east. Wednesday overall should be fairly quiet, but a little bit cooler and windy.
Right. And then we've got another front.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's another front, not nearly as powerful as this one, but that Wednesday front could bring 40-plus mile-per-hour winds out of the northwest, and it's certainly going to bring in cooler air, and it's certainly going to bring in an additional chance for rain. And at this point, I wouldn't rule out a couple of isolated thunderstorms. And it's that second front that's really going to change the temperature regime for us later in the week. It's not a big player for tonight, but that second front that comes in midweek is going to turn us into highs in the 40s and 50s for 2, 3, 4 days in a row, and overnight lows that are going to drop into the 30s around here and may drop even a little bit lower than that for folks in northern and western Nebraska.
And so I'm going to punch us back up. We had a couple questions come through. Danielle wanted to know, when was the last time we've had a severe tornadic storm front come through Nebraska overnight, and why is that so rare? Probably couldn't tell you necessarily the last time one came through, but again, a lot of our severe weather that we have, again, it all depends on the heating of the day, the diurnal cycle. So again, a lot of our thunderstorms are starting to fire off at 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon. So our severe weather threat peaks, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. In this case, the atmosphere capped a little bit. So with the heating of the day, we didn't get thunderstorms, and we're more relying on the dynamics of the system that's moving through in the low-level jet.
And a lot of times when we see severe weather overnight or during the early morning hours of the next day, it's from severe weather that develops west of North Platte in the heating of the day when the temperatures are the highest and the dew points are the highest. And so then the severe weather develops there and races across the state and still packs a little bit of a punch by the time it gets here, but isn't nearly as dynamic as it is 150 miles west of here when it begins. So we need that instability, and that instability a lot of times this time of the year is driven by the heating of the day. And so we had heating of the day today, but as you mentioned, we had warm temperatures aloft, and that put a lid on the atmosphere as far as around here. And so it's not unheard of, but it is unusual, a little bit unusual, to see this type of significant severe weather outbreak, at least the potential of that, not developing until after. I mean, we're already at 8:35, and we've seen very little in the way of severe weather, and this tornado watch just got issued 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So that's the first tornado watch of the night. It doesn't come out till 8:30, and when you look at the satellite radar, there's nothing there.
Usually the end times for our tornado watches are 8. Or
That's
8:30.
true. That's absolutely
times.
right, especially in the summertime. So we'll see what happens. And as we mentioned before, we'd be thrilled to be off on this one and have it be maybe not quite as bad. Is there a scenario where that happens?
Sure. There's always a chance.
There's always a chance. I haven't read, most of the material we're looking at hasn't said, sometimes you get the dry slot in and that eliminates your severe weather chance or eliminates some of the moisture. We've watched those dew points crawl into the 50s and 60s throughout the day, and they're still there now. And so with that dry line approaching, instead of a dry slot, it's going to be almost like a frontal boundary. And so that's going to try and aid that lift, and that's going to try and help create those thunderstorms.
And there's another question. Would you explain in layman's terms a hodograph, which is getting a little bit into the weeds in severe weather, but basically, shear is one of the important things that we need to have severe weather, which again is differences in wind speed and direction with height. A hodograph.
Slow that down a little bit. Give them that shear, because it's not a difficult concept if you have a time to wrap your mind around.
Yeah. So differences in wind speed or direction with height. So again, on a day like today, we have strong southeasterly flow
winds at the surface,
but you go up a kilometer or two, and the winds are more out of the west or southwest, and so that the turning of the winds creates twisting in the atmosphere, which causes your updraft and your thunderstorm to start to rotate, and that's when you get a supercell, and that's when you can get hail and damaging winds and all the rest of it.
So it's all about the shear. It really is all about the direction and the speeds of the wind changing as you go higher and higher into the atmosphere.
And so a hodograph is basically a tool for meteorologists. You plot it out using values for shear from the ground to 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, all the way up to 6 kilometers, and it can make shapes, and depending on what the shape is, it can kind of give us an indication of this is the way the winds are turning with height, and that can give us an indication of these tend to produce X, type of severe weather, whether that be right-moving supercells, large tornadoes, things like that. So it can kind of just give us a clue as to what we may expect.
So the acronym that we use, and we've talked about, and when we did weather schools during COVID, was SLIM, SLIM, which stands for shear, lift, instability, and moisture. And we have all of those things coming tonight when it comes to severe weather. We have all 4 of those in enough abundance to create a situation that we're concerned about.
And Kevin West wants to know what's going on with the temperatures and data at the Lincoln Airport. That is an FAA issue that we have no power or control of. So unfortunately, that is still waiting to be resolved. But jumping back in here, I punched up a different model. Again, the model we looked at with your surface map was our in-house model. This is the rapid refresh model. Kind of want to walk people through, again, some of the timing. Starting off at 11 o'clock tonight, again, there's some activity along that warm front in northeast Nebraska, maybe some scattered activity in the southeast. But stepping through kind of hour by hour, you can see the activity that's going to develop along the warm front and the activity down across Kansas that's going to develop along that dry line.
And this is going to be a good indication that it's 8:30, 8:40 now. We may not see a lot of activity for another hour or two before things even in central Kansas start to percolate. And so by the time you get to midnight, by the time you get to 1 a.m., 2 a.m., you can see that cluster of thunderstorms developing. And again, that would be the area, those would be the storms that we would have the greatest concern with as far as possibly tornadic, possibly dropping the apple-size hail, the in excess of 3-inch diameter hail, the winds that could gust to 75 miles an hour. And so where are you at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Sleeping.
Now, if you're a meteorologist working at 10, 11,
You're working.
you're going to be here. But if you're a regular guy that's got a regular job and needs to get to bed because he's got to get up or she's got to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, these are the kind of things that could fall under the radar for you a little bit, and this is the kind of thing that will surely rock you out of bed, and it's better to have at least a little bit of a heads up. And so that's one of the reasons why the tornado watch is in effect. It's in effect, and there's not even a thunderstorm within that area that we can see at this point, but we're betting that things are going to happen. And once they start developing, that development could come rather quickly, and so we would rather have you know how you're going to get that information, how you're going to get alerted, and know that it might be well after 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, or 12 o'clock tonight when things move through your neighborhood.
And so central Nebraska there, kind of that Highway 281 corridor, especially in south central Nebraska, the Tri-Cities, probably, again, your window starting to see a lot of this activity is going to be probably after midnight. Again, probably between midnight and about 3, 4, 5 a.m. is when those thunderstorms could potentially roll through. As you get past 4 a.m., that's when you're kind of Lincoln and eastern Nebraska is kind of entering the chat,
right,
to potentially seeing these thunderstorms. But again, you move forward in time, 6 a.m. here, and a lot of folks are maybe starting their day, and we're looking at the potential for some widespread thunderstorm activity across the eastern third of the state, including here in Lincoln. 7 a.m. again, you're looking at drive time, a lot of kids getting kids getting parents up, that's entirely possible, but parents also getting kids up at the same time and heading off to school. Again, we're dealing with the potential for heavy thunderstorms, and again, also dealing with potentially strong to severe thunderstorms at the same time.
So we don't think it's out of the question that there could be a severe weather watch of some kind issued for eastern Nebraska at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's fairly rare. I mean, it happens, but that's fairly rare when you get your initial watch for a particular area and it doesn't happen until 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And that could happen this time. Bill's looking at the rapid refresh, which is one of our more updated weather models. It gets information and provides us with information in a more timely basis, because some of those models get 6, get 12-hour information, that rapid refresh.
Updates every hour.
Every hour. And so that's why and again, you folks at home, this isn't your first rodeo, I know. You know that these, the maps that we provide you are rarely exactly on, right? But it's a ballpark, and it is an indicator for you to go, okay, this is my window. My window is 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. That's when I think we've got a good chance at seeing some heavy activity, if not severe activity, in portions of Kansas, south central Nebraska, and then that window between 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. in eastern and southeastern Nebraska. That's your window to be prepared for.
And so looking here at the thunderstorm chances over the next 24 hours, this is specifically for Lincoln, again, 10 p.m. tonight to 10 p.m. on Tuesday. Again, we're going to be looking at the potential here over the next couple hours for some severe thunderstorms, but really, again, the best opportunity is going to come as we head through the overnight hours, come drive time as we head into Tuesday morning. And then really, as quickly as some of these storms will move in overnight, they'll move out fairly quickly because we're expecting kind of a line of storms.
Right.
And so once we hit kind of the other side of the line, the chances will drop off pretty quickly. And again, like we mentioned, we may see the sun pop out for a couple hours. We still threw in 20% chance, just in case. But then as the low then tracks through, our chances for mainly just rain will jump back up in the late afternoon.
And I just want folks at home to know, I tried to get you to put a little red in one of those bars in the afternoon just for the slight chance that there could still be an isolated, stronger storm. Like what we're worried about tonight and tomorrow morning, absolutely not. But this is that time of the year where you get those dynamic changes, especially in your temperatures. And when you have surface low and upper level low that's all sweeping through your area, it's never out of the question that something could get marginally severe.
And so we've kind of skipped over, temperatures and wind and everything like that. But lows tomorrow morning will be fairly mild thanks to the high dew points that we're seeing here in eastern Nebraska. Again, temperature can't drop below the dew point. When the dew point's 65 out right now, can't get any colder than that. So we're expecting mid-50s to mid-60s for lows tomorrow morning for eastern Nebraska, 40s and 50s in the west. Then daytime highs tomorrow will be cooler than they've been the past couple days. We're talking upper 50s to upper 60s with some low to mid-70s in far eastern and southeastern Nebraska. And that will come with winds throughout the day.
Right.
At their peak, probably gusting 40 to 45 miles an hour, and even stronger in thunderstorms.
Absolutely right. Now, do you go farther than Tuesday, or is Tuesday our last day part?
I go to the 7 day.
Okay, and the 7 day will show folks what we're talking about as well. The next 18 hours are going to be the most significant as far as the severe weather threat is concerned. So we've got weather alert day carrying us into tomorrow morning, no doubt about that, with an isolated thunderstorm chance. And then with that next system coming through on Wednesday, you can see temperatures for this time of the year, not that bad, just a lot cooler than where we've been. I think we were 89, and then I think today the last thing I saw was 87, but that was still being updated. So we're talking upper 80s, and we should be in the mid and upper 60s right now. So that's 72 tomorrow, and that's 70 on Wednesday for highs are within 3 or 4 degrees of where we should be. But then we drop temperatures back into the 50s, and when you add a little bit of wind in there on Thursday and Friday, it's not even going to feel that cool, that mild. Not that 50s are mild, but it's not going to feel that good. And then we're going to drop temperatures for overnight lows into the low to mid 30s.
Yeah, and so that was the other thing I wanted to touch on. Again, I many family members who have asked me if they can put plants in the ground.
Time to go. Yep, time to get that garden going.
And I would say we're getting pretty close. I think probably this week, with the potential maybe for a frost or freeze late this week into the weekend, you get past that, you're probably looking at better odds of being able to put some plants in the ground and things like that. But yeah, it will definitely be cool. Again, that was the Lincoln 7-day. These are temperatures for select cities across the state. Again, looking at the 10-day, you can see the obvious cool down there, second half of the week into the weekend, but temperatures do look like they rebound through the middle part of the week next week back into the 70s.
And you just have to remember that what time of the year we are. Well, this is spring. And wide fluctuations in temperatures are just part of the deal here, right? It's the beginning of severe weather. Really, it's unfortunately just the beginning of severe weather season. That's going to peak in May and June. So I would guess, I felt for the longest time that we were fortunate that we did not have a few more episodes. There have been parts of the country that have been hit really hard by severe weather during the early part of spring. And we had, for the most part, been able to dance around that. And maybe we can do some more dancing tonight, but at some point you got to pay the band, right? So we'll see if tonight is one of those nights where things get a little bit nasty, and that's what we're afraid of, and that's why we spent the last several minutes here with folks to try to get caught up to date, make sure that they know what could happen, and it could happen late and into early tomorrow morning, and that's a little bit of an odd time for us, but it doesn't diminish the threat and the reasoning behind why we want folks to be prepared, because if you can hear the sirens from your house, great, but those outdoor sirens are not meant to alert folks that are in a building or in their homes or in a school. So that's why having a way to get this information, even at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, if you don't have the TV on or you're not listening to your radio, is a very, very important thing.
Yep, and so again, really quickly before we let people go, again, I just wanted to punch this up. Again, you can scan that QR code to get that 1011 weather app downloaded as one of your ways to get your weather information tonight. Make sure those alerts are turned on. You will hear Ken's voice warn you. You can turn them off after the fact.
I certainly do.
But again, scan that. It's a good way to get your weather information. And again, really quickly, severe thunderstorm watch for parts of central Nebraska into the northwest through midnight tonight. Tornado watch in yellow until 3 a.m. Tuesday. We will likely see additional watches covering parts of eastern Nebraska as we head through the rest of the night tonight into the overnight hours. Again, you can see that there's the severe weather risk. Again, for Lincoln specifically, we're probably talking after 3 a.m. before we start to really ramp up.
That's certainly the way it looks right now, but we'll have an update at 10 o'clock in the weathercast, and then just a reminder that we will have the weather center manned all night long. So even if this turns out to be a miss, we'll be happy to give up some hours of sleep to make sure that happens. Bill, can you punch up? Do you have the SATRAD? Let's look at before we send folks back to whatever it is they're doing on this Monday evening. Let's take one more quick look at that SATRAD, because you and I have been here now, sitting here for a half hour. Take a look at if anything looks like it's starting to get any more interesting. Certainly doesn't look like it in south central Nebraska and north central Kansas. We do have that activity that continues in southeastern Nebraska. It looks like that's propagating a little bit, but from here I don't know that it looks like it's getting any more intense, or if there's any kind of intensification there. But as we mentioned earlier, certainly can't rule out a shower or thunderstorm rolling through Lincoln. We just think the severe weather threat is going to be much later, or the most significant severe weather threat is going to be much later tonight and into early tomorrow.
So keep your eyes peeled to 10:11, both on air and online. Again, Ken will have you updated here in a little over an hour, coming up with the 10 o'clock show. Again, download that 10:11 weather app again for all the latest information as well. Ken, thank you for taking time.
You bet. Glad to do
I
it.
know you got to spend the next hour getting hair and makeup ready to go, and all the rest.
I'm going to need more time than that. Can we back that 10 o'clock show up a little bit?
Couple minutes, yeah. Go on late. Just re-air the Billy Joel in its entirety.
We missed some of that.
Yeah, we did. All right, so appreciate everyone for tuning in, for watching. Again, as always, hope everyone stays safe tonight and has a nice night.